Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'm making this video for May 28th, 2025. Thought I would talk about a somewhat controversial topic today. There is a general agreement that the Iraq War was a failure for the United States, the second Iraq War. And I wanted to examine that claim. I think those of you who were alive, who followed it during that time like I did, you'll be pretty familiar with the arguments to why it was a failure. But let me present a different perspective on it. First off, what was the goal of the Iraq War? It was to topple the Saddam Hussein regime and combat Islamic terrorism throughout the world. Well, as the first count, the war was absolutely a success. Saddam Hussein is dead, his sons are dead, one of his grandsons is dead, and most of the senior members of his regime are either dead or replaced in jail, but they are largely all out of power at this point. Saddam Hussein's regime is destroyed and definitely not coming back. So from that perspective, the war is a total success. But the other question is, what about Iraq itself? We had a huge nation building program in Iraq? Did it succeed? Generally, if you ask most people, whether it's on the MAGA right, on the left, whatever, they'll say no, it's total failure, total bust. We wasted everything. Did we really though? Let's start with the idea of their government. The government that was instituted by the United States in Iraq beginning in 2006 with their elections is still functioning today in 2025, 19 years later. They have had 5 total elections. They are set to have their 6th election this November. The women still maintain at least 25% of all the seats in the Iraqi parliament, and there are a certain number of reserved seats for ethnic and religious minorities. So democracy in Iraq, believe it or not, is still functioning, and it is the democracy that the United States set up. Now, they have changed laws since then, obviously. Parliament's been in session for decades. I'm not saying it's exactly the same as it was in 2006. It absolutely is not. But that government is still functioning. Now, people can certainly point out that there are ample problems going on in Iraq, and I will certainly not disagree with you on that. But a failed state, it is not. I would hardly call it a super successful state, but it is not a failed state. That government is working. What about the economy for the people of Iraq? Well, let's take a quick look at some numbers. Um, for starters, I'm sorry, hold on, get to my number. Right before the US-led invasion, let's go to 2002. If we keep everything in constant American dollars, so this would be about 2024 dollars, the GDP of Iraq is about $33 billion. The GDP of Iraq now is about $250 billion. So their economy is roughly 8 times the size now than it was before the US-led invasion. Now, there's certainly been a lot of volatility during that time period. It has hardly been a smooth ride, but oh my God, is that a lot of growth? That is pretty amazing. What about on a GDP per capita basis? Now, so far the numbers I found, I believe, are in nominal dollars, so we'll have to keep that in mind. But 2002 per capita GDP in Iraq is about $1,254 per year. That's roughly 1 month at minimum wage here in Florida. Currently, it's at $5,512 per year. So per capita GDP has more than quadrupled. It's up about 4.5 fold. So the economy is 8 times as big, and on a per capita basis, Iraqis are 4.5 times wealthier than they were prior to the invasion. And we still have a functional government. It still protects rights for women and minorities. Um, Also, it is not a threat. Iraq is no longer a threat to its neighbors. Nations like Kuwait and Saudi Arabia do not have to fear invasion by the Iraqi government. Now, am I ignoring a million problems with Iraq? Yes. Am I ignoring all the violence with ISIS and with various terror groups and all that kind of stuff? Yes, I am. So there are certainly fair criticisms of the point I'm making here, but the general narrative that the United States went into Iraq and we lost and failed, I'm not sure is true when the government we established is still functioning 20 years later, still protecting minority rights, and their economy is 8 times as big. I would also point out that in virtually every significant large-scale engagement of the war, both with Saddam's conventional military and with the insurgency that followed, the United States military won virtually every single one of those battles. United States military was never driven from the battlefield. The way the war was covered by the news was that any combat at all was deemed a defeat for the American military. Didn't matter what the ratios were. I remember years ago I was watching news coverage of some event, and basically a convoy of American vehicles had been ambushed. The Americans got out. They recovered the bodies of 23 insurgents that they killed. There was a couple of Americans who were wounded in it, and as far as the news was concerned, the Americans had absolutely gotten slaughtered. By virtue of the fact that we had like 2 or 3 people wounded versus 24 dead insurgents. So I would suggest that I think the news coverage was perhaps not always accurate in how it portrayed things. Again, I am not trying to say that Iraq is some tremendous success story and that if I could go back in time and I could make the decision, I would do the same thing George Bush did. I think there's a lot of legitimate criticism about how that entire thing was handled and about mistakes that were made and about high costs that were paid for this. But I also think we should consider the other side of the story, that we have left a functional country that is no longer a threat to its neighbors and is far more prosperous and far more democratic than what it was before. Again, it is a country with a huge number of problems, and their government is only barely functional, and it is fragile. It may not be a stable government 10 years from now. I don't know. But I'm just saying, let's consider these facts and, ask ourselves, is our popularly accepted narrative of this as just being an unmitigated disaster and a total failure, is that accurate in light of these facts? And I would suggest that, well, I think it's a very complicated issue, and I think there's a lot you can argue as to why this was a bad idea and why it was handled badly, and you can argue that in good faith with a lot of good evidence. I do think there's another side of the argument that is generally not made and is not considered, and perhaps we should consider it. Either way, I hope everyone's having a good day, and I hope you found this interesting and thought-provoking. And if you liked the video, please like and subscribe, and if not, thank you for listening and giving me a chance. I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.